genuinely.
The point is the only place the Confederates are winning is in the East. They're losing everything out here.
Yeah, I know. I'm amazed. Don't sell these guys short for being so totally mercenaries.
No, they're not. No, they're not. I mean, because they obviously care about the moral high ground about the slavery issue.
And just the loss of life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really awesome book. This is the. This is the city cemetery. There are some Revolutionary War soldiers buried in here, by the way. This is the fort built by the 71st Ohio. You can see if you look around, this is the highest ground in downtown Dover, and they will clear a field of fire all around by burning the 17 buildings, including the county courthouse, in August of 1861. After Clarksville was captured by Tom Woodard and Adam Rankin Johnson's Confederate forces, Johnson and a handful of men go back up to Madisonville, Kentucky, where he's left the bulk of his command because there's a Union incursion moving against him, and Woodard will come over here with the combined commands, and he wants to bag the other 4 companies in the 71st. He's already gotten the 6 that surrendered at Clarksville. This is the, I'm trying to think of the major's name, because Kyle was killed at Shiloh, so this is after Shiloh. It's the guy who took over from the major, but you got the 4 companies here, and they built a horseshoe fort right here on the cemetery, because as you can see, it's the high ground. So Woodard will become a devotee of Forrest. In fact, he'll serve with Forrest later that year of the Bluff, where he'll send in and goes, I've got you surrounded, I've got more men than you've got, why don't you go ahead and surrender, and we'll parole you, and all will be over. And the commander here basically says, hey, go ahead and bring it, we're here to fight. So Woodard's guys will assault, and Woodard will get shot off his horse. The horse will get killed from under him, and he'll be defeated here. And he will crawl all the way back to Clarksville. And then in early September, a brigade from this area under the command of William Lowe, colonel of the 5th Iowa Cavalry, will march with the 13th Wisconsin. These 4 companies, the 71st and 2 sections of Illinois Light Artillery, and they will attack Woodard at the Battle of Brigance Hill, which is the only battle fought in our county. It's about 1,400 Federals versus about 1,000 Confederates. And Woodard will be defeated there because he doesn't have any artillery, and they will chase them back through Clarksville and recapture the city. And it will go into no man's land situation until December, Christmas Day of 1862, when Clarksvillians are thinking, gee, maybe this war is going to pass us by. And on Christmas morning, marching out from Russellville, Kentucky, at the head of a full brigade of 2,300 men, is Colonel Sanders Bruce. The 20th Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken, is Morgan's. There's a Morgan connection there. I forget what it is. Where we have something on Roundtable that's an expert on Sanders Bruce, but he's married into a family that has John Hunt Morgan connections. So this is the first fight, and the horseshoe fort that they built has obviously been destroyed. Okay, go ahead and run. And we'll stop briefly at the National Cemetery. We're not going to dismount, and I'll show you where the 3rd Battle of Dover took place in February. This is the one coming up that Forrest and Wheeler were involved in. And Forrest does not remain friends with Joe Wheeler pretty much for the rest of the war, because he had just come back from the December '62 raid in Western Kentucky and Western Tennessee, where he destroyed the Mobile and Ohio Railroad for 6 months, and his men hadn't been reprovisioned yet, and Wheeler orders them up here to Palmyra, which is in our county. The earthworks that Forrest built are still there. And to interdict the river, Rosecrans finds out about it and orders all traffic stopped here at Dover and nothing to leave Nashville. Here, right? So Forrest, after a couple days, will get picked up by Wheeler, who's over at the Harpeth Shoals, and he's bushwhacked a couple transports over there, and they will try to assault Dover and get defeated by the 83rd Illinois. And go straight ahead. And turn in through the gates. Not this first road, the second road. This is where the fort the 83rd Illinois built and is now the National Cemetery. This is also the administrative offices of Fort Donelson National Battlefield, the superintendent's office. They just met Brian this morning. His office is in the nice house, and then the law enforcement people are down that way. By the way, if you want to tip a different Civil War program, Mike Manning, who is the chief ranger here, is an Okie. I don't know if he's from Muskogee, but he's definitely an Okie. And he wrote that fabulous Part 1 in Blue and Gray a couple of years ago on the Civil War in the Indian Territory. And Dave Roth liked it so well he had him write a Part 2. So if you want him as a program, let me know and I'll get you his email address. So this is the National Cemetery. They do an observance here every Memorial Day where they put out a couple thousand candles, luminaries they call them, and it's pretty amazing. They do a lot of the national cemeteries around the United States, usually on Memorial Day. But this is, if you were to look above this from a helicopter looking down, this is a horseshoe-shaped ridge, where it's wider at the back towards the river, so it's a horseshoe-shaped earthwork when you got Wharton and Force coming from the town coming up this way, and Wharton and other people coming from that position, and basically the 83rd Illinois just shooting them down and slaughtering them. That's going to, Force guys run out of ammunition pretty quick. Force will be shot off a horse. He will lose his first 2 horses here at Fort Donelson of the 29 that will be shot out from under him in war. He will kill 30 federal soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. As he always said, I was a horse ahead. That is a man that doesn't tell his troops where to go. He's follow me, boys. Okay, we can turn around and head on back to the Park Visitor Center. You can Western stop there. Does that get you on the road? So Maurice has promised to buy 5 copies of the new Tullahoma book with my essay in it, right, Maurice?
Not exactly.
Well, one's for Norval. You got to get one for him.
I'll give you Norval's email address.
Well, one will be for Doug, because Doug's joining you guys later on, right?
Yeah. Well, since he's the president of the round table, he can buy them all of them.
Well, I owe him for that book. I thought we'd give you guys the book. You got me that Scott Hartway book for your guys' meeting. And you can just go straight on out and follow the sign. In terms of Civil War battles, this is basically a corps versus a corps. Of course, the war gets significantly larger, but you have a number of major players that come out of this. Of course, Grant being the big one for the Federals, Forrest being the big one for the Confederates. Hiram Granberry goes from a captain to a brigade commander in Claiborne's division. His brigade will be captured at Arkansas Post and then exchanged, and then Claiborne will take the Texans in. And you have, of course, Lieutenant Colonel James McPherson, who's Grant's chief of engineers here, goes on commanding the Army of the Tennessee. You have a number of other officers like Augustus Rice, who becomes a brigade commander. Morgan L. Smith becomes a division commander. So this is kind of a, if Atlanta campaign's the major leagues of the Civil War, this is definitely the minor league where these guys learn a lot. Now keep in mind that a lot of these officers, this is their first time in combat commanding anything larger than a company. So these men are learning on the fly. And I think they do a pretty darn good job of how to master moving large amounts of men. What Grant does a lot, particularly from November to January, November 61, January 62, is he's got his men out doing raids and exercises, basically aiming against Polk to convince Polk that he's coming after Columbus at some point. But what that does is teaches the commanders and the men how to work together in the field in a field situation. So if you look at how many men here that have been in combat, only a handful of regiments that have been at Belmont on the federal side have been in combat, but the bulk of the Army had some level of field experience. With the exception of some of the troops that Buell will send over, including the brigade that shows up the night of the 15th. There's another 5 regiments that show up that night. 58th Ohio, I forget what the Indiana regiment is, and a couple of Illinois units will show up. But on the Confederate side, the only troops that have seen combat experience were Floyd's brigade. They had fought in Western Virginia in 1861, places like Carnifex Ferry, Gauley Bridge, places like that, and that even includes the 20th Mississippi. But the bulk of the Confederate Army were green as the grass. Now, Buckner's people had gone on raids in Kentucky along the Green River, so they had some field experience, but you've got a lot of green troops here. And when you're digging ditches, you're not drilling and sharpening your abilities and teaching your men how to work with their officers. After Shiloh, where the horror and shock of that battle sinks into everybody, by that time, pretty much everybody becomes a veteran. Now you'll have a wonderful day with Thomas Cartwright. The next couple of days, he's absolutely fabulous historian if you've never been on a tour with him before. He will lace you with great personal stories. That's one of his great skills as a tour guide. And he knows the Battle of Franklin, he knows Spring Hill, and he knows Nashville. He's one of the best Civil War historians down here. I got the great privilege of spending 4 days with him doing Atlanta last week, so we had a lot. I've known him for over 20 years. That's the first time we've done a tour together, so it was a lot of fun for both of us. And I thank you for inviting me to be a part of your tour. It's my pleasure, my honor. I hope I taught you a lot about this campaign and how vitally important it is. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your tour as well.
Thank you.
Come back and see us sometime. We still have to, thank you. We still have to do Atlanta Part 2 sometime, so we'll get you back down there. We're doing Atlanta Part 2 for Lowe's House next March, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day.